Welcome back. In today's Explainer, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating journey. We're going to unpack the wildly multidisciplinary, sometimes chaotic, but ultimately highly structured pipeline of how raw scientific research is actually transformed into the everyday market-ready products we use. It's this incredible space where physics meets business strategy and hardcore engineering runs right into human psychology. To kick things off, I want you to just think about this for a second. Where did Gatorade, the World Wide Web, or even the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines actually come from? We tend to assume that these massive commercial breakthroughs just happen by magic in some corporate boardroom, right? Or maybe that a lone genius has a sudden eureka moment in their garage. But the reality is far more structured, and it's deeply rooted in rigorous methodology. Well, it turns out every single one of those world-changing products was born in a university R&D lab. They are absolutely shining examples of the incredible scientific advancements that can happen when academia and industry partner up. And even though federal funding for basic research has been on the decline over the last decade, cutting-edge university innovation is still going strong. It's heavily propped up by corporate R&D spending and this relentless drive to actually commercialize new discoveries. So here's the pipeline we're going to walk through today. 1. Going from the lab to the real world. 2. Protecting your intellectual property. 3. Human-centered design. 4. Navigating technology readiness levels. 5. Deep tech's long game. And finally, 6. Launching your science startup. All right, step 1. Moving from the lab to the real world and the incredibly high stakes involved. Just look at this number, a staggering 42% failure rate. A massive multinational study looking at new product introductions found that out of every 100 new product ideas that enter development, the vast majority are just killed off before they ever see the light of day. And honestly, a huge chunk of the ones that do make it to market still end up failing commercially. This 42% failure rate really frames the core problem we're talking about today. It's exactly why you need rigorous, structured development frameworks just to survive. To actually beat those brutal odds, institutions rely on a highly structured timeline. You have your initial lab discovery at year 0, sure, but then you're spending literally years securing intellectual property, designing the product, and engineering it for scale before you ever get close to a market launch at year 5 or beyond. It's a marathon for sure. Which brings us to step 2, protecting your intellectual property, which is really the legal foundation of this whole process. Now, the real game changer here is a piece of legislation known as the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980. This specific act is literally what makes modern academic commercialization possible in the US. It allows universities to actually own and license inventions that were made using federal funds. By setting it up this way, it incentivizes universities to take their discoveries and turn them into products that actually benefit the public, rather than just letting all that groundbreaking research gather dust in some academic journal. Once that ownership is locked down, how do you get it to the private sector? Well, you've got a few vehicles for this. You've got straightforward licensing of patents. You can form multi-million-dollar corporate alliances, do sponsored research, or even spin out brand new startups. But here's a really fascinating little detail. Universities usually avoid exclusively licensing unrecorded know-how. That's the knowledge that exists solely inside a researcher's head. Why? Because if you lock up someone's personal skill set exclusively, it completely conflicts with their academic freedom to do future research and share knowledge. Makes sense, right? Moving on to section 3, human-centered product design. Basically, how do we make all this brilliant science actually usable? This is where human-centered design, or HCD, steps into the spotlight. As defined by ISO standards, it's all about actively involving the users. And this is a massive paradigm shift. We're taking the project completely out of those isolated, highly controlled laboratory environments and throwing it into real-world fieldwork. We're relying on social sciences like ethnology, and we're constructing real-use scenarios to figure out what this product actually needs to succeed in the hands of a human being. And design is constantly evolving. Looking ahead to 2026 design trends, we're seeing this huge push toward tactile textures, hand-drawn details, and anti-minimalism. Honestly, after a decade of these hyper-polished interfaces, and now with a flood of purely AI-generated content hitting the market, users are really craving visual elements that signal human intention and authorship. Plus, things like high-contrast functionality aren't just stylistic choices anymore. They're absolute baseline requirements for accessibility, making sure these science-backed products can be used quickly by a lot more people in a lot more conditions. But here's the catch. You can't just linger in the design phase forever. Urgency is critical. Luckily, generative AI tools are now stepping in and reducing product development cycle times by up to 70%. And that speed is an absolute must, because ask any product designer, the moment research data is collected, it immediately begins decaying in validity. Society moves fast, culture changes rapidly. The faster you iterate, the more relevant your science is going to be when it finally hits the market.
That brings us to Section 4, Navigating Technology Readiness Levels, essentially the strict engineering protocol.
Check out this framework. This is the Technology Readiness Level, or TRL, timeline. It's a highly standardized systems engineering protocol used by massive organizations like NASA and DARPA. Just look at how it maps the journey. You start way down at TRL 0 with pure, basic first principles, totally greenfield research. Then you slowly climb the ladder. TRL 3 is your proof of concept. TRL 6 is application development in a relevant environment, all the way up to TRL 9, which means the tech is fully flight-ready and successfully deployed. Having this framework forces all these interdependent, cross-functional teams to speak the exact same language when they're judging a product's maturity. Now, let's shift gears for Section 5. We're talking about deep tech's long game and these notorious perpetual 5-year technologies. I really love the juxtaposition here. On one side, you've got researchers tackling this incredibly massive, complex quantum hardware. On the other side, it's literal tweezers doing delicate precision microassembly. This perfectly highlights a concept called technological interdependence. In deep tech fields like quantum computing or nuclear fusion, the core physics might be completely sound, but the actual progress is totally bottlenecked by a lack of advancements in other fields, like cryogenics or laser photonics or the microassembly you're looking at here. Every time you solve one obstacle, it just exposes a deeper one, which pushes final deployment decades into the future. Because of those cascading bottlenecks, if you want to keep these perpetual 5-year technologies from completely stalling out, you simply can't rely on isolated companies. There absolutely must be a continuous, open loop of collaboration. You have fundamental public labs providing that long horizon exploration of materials, while small, agile startups reveal entirely new scientific challenges by running into the harsh constraints of manufacturing and commercial performance. It's a necessary ecosystem. Finally, we reach Section 6, launching your science startup, or basically making the leap from PhD to CEO. This quote from Benjamin Franklin, which was actually featured in the Penn Center for Innovation's guide, just hits the nail on the head. To succeed, jump as quickly at opportunities as you do at conclusions. It perfectly captures the mindset shift that has to happen. In academia, you're literally trained to be cautious, to relentlessly test your conclusions. But out in the startup world, you need decisive, commercial action. You have to jump at market opportunities with that exact same level of energy.
So, if you're a PhD transitioning to a CEO, what are the actual actionable steps? First up, validate the idea. Prove that your research actually solves a real-world pain point. Second, protect that IP by identifying your patents and copyrights. Third, you've got to build a network way outside of your academic bubble. And finally, seek funding. But keep in mind, when you're pitching for funding, you absolutely must translate all that dense academic jargon into a compelling, simple narrative that investors can easily wrap their heads around.
It really boils down to a fundamental shift in identity. A researcher is laser-focused on uncovering truths and publishing their lab discoveries. An entrepreneur, on the flip side, has to focus on market validation and actually commercializing that impact. Now, a successful founder doesn't just abandon their scientific rigor, no way, but they do have to balance those deep technical insights with the very practical demands of business strategy, time management, and what the customer actually needs. Which brings us to one final, kind of provocative question to end on today. When we look at that massive, decades-long pipeline, from a raw TRL 0 lab discovery all the way to a commercial product, we have to ask, is the wait for these perpetual 5-year technologies actually worth it? When stuff like fusion and quantum computing are always seemingly just 5 years away, it's easy to get frustrated. But remember, the grueling process of turning profound science into products yields incredible, iterative commercial benefits along the way. We get better lasers, stronger materials, far better simulations. So perhaps this long, incredibly difficult pipeline is ultimately the greatest investment we can make in our future. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.